I used to spend almost all of my time out in the wilderness about 10 years ago. I worked as a ranger in the Bridger Teton National Forest. A lot of my time was spent on horseback. We managed the Teton Wilderness area. It's almost 600,000 acres of wilderness, and the only way to manage it effectively was to use horses. It's a very wet wilderness that has a lot of river and creek crossings. I was going along a river on horseback one day, heading for an area where we were working on trail repair. We were on a familiar trail that was one of our favorites. My horse loved it. That general area was a good workout for the horses, as it had a lot of natural obstacles, like fallen logs for us to jump, and my horse liked to splash in the stream. My mare was a little temperamental though, feisty, and always taking in everything around her. She was always very alert, but that day, she started feeling more agitated than feisty. She was dancing around and didn't seem to want to move forward. There was definitely something that had her attention and that she didn't like. I couldn't see anything between the trees that would have upset her. I didn't hear or smell anything, but horses have very keen senses, and it isn't unnatural for a horse to be aware of something you're not. I figured there were people walking somewhere through the trees, or maybe an animal I couldn't see. I tried to urge her onward, but she wouldn't budge. She just kept dancing around on the spot and trying to spin around like she wanted to go back the way we had come. Then she suddenly went shock still. I could feel every muscle in her body locked tight, and tremors were going down her spine. She was ready to bolt. She had raised herself to full height, head up, ears pricked up, nostrils flared, and she kept snorting. And then, out of nowhere, this thing darted out in front of us. It ran out on all fours and stopped in the middle of the trail. Then it stood up on its hind legs and just stared at us. It was about 20 feet away from us. I hadn't had any feeling or hint that there was something in the trees, but when it sprang out, I felt instant dread. The thing we saw was not animal or human, though it had a very human shape. When I say it ran on all fours, imagine a human bent over, with hands and feet flat on the floor. It had disproportionately long arms, and it was really thin and spindly. It was way too thin to be human. Its head was wider than its waist. It was hairless as far as I could tell, and its skin was a grayish-brown color that made it blend in with the forest. Everything about it was disproportionately long, like all its features, from fingers to toes, had been stretched out. When it stood up, it was tall. It seemed to be about eye level with my horse. I'm not sure if it's because of the distance between us that I couldn't make out its facial features, or if it just didn't have facial features to make out. I can only remember big black eyes staring at us. I imagine if I touched it, it would feel rough. The skin didn't look smooth, but not really scaly either. It stood like it was ready to tackle someone. I got a good but brief look at it, because in the next moment, my horse spun around and burst into a gallop from a standstill and galloped back up the trail. I was so shocked and freaked out that I didn't try to stop her. I think I actually urged her on, holding on as tight as I could. I don't think the thing chased after us, although I admit I didn't dare look back to see if it was. But the horse galloped like the fires of hell were after her. Only once we were back at the trailhead, where there was some other people, did she stop. There's no way I could have stopped her if I wanted to. The people at the trailhead gawked at us suddenly, bursting off the trail like that. Even though my horse considered this place safe enough to stop, she still kept her attention on the trail behind her. She kept staring in that direction, wide-eyed and snorting. I don't know if that thing was lurking in the tree line or what. I managed to ride her back toward the stable, but it was hard to calm her down, and she seemed to be in shock. We went on a long trot in the opposite direction to burn off some of that nervous energy. Later, my supervisor kept saying it must have been a deer with chronic wasting disease or something. Obviously, if you hadn't seen that thing with your own eyes, you would be grasping at straws. I really don't know what to make of it. I don't even like thinking about it. I've spooked myself just writing it out. I don't understand how I'd never seen any sign of such thing before. And then, all of a sudden, there it was right in front of me. Over the next several weeks, we gradually started to feel a little more normal. But I seriously think both me and my horse had lasting PTSD from that event. Looking back now, it all started with one goat. It was a year ago when I lost one of my prized goats. Some animal had killed it. I chalked it up to a predator attack typical for farmers, especially new farmers who didn't have their shit together. My fences were not the best. In fact, they were terrible. Most likely, a coyote came at night and quickly dispatched my goat, and obviously, something disturbed it before it could start eating. That would be the only reason why a coyote would leave its kill. I was so overwhelmed with grief and regret that I overlooked the obvious. There wasn't any blood. It is easy to see my mistake when I look back, but that realization might have helped me sooner. However, I didn't, and soon, I had a crisis on my hands. The first goat was older, so I chalked it up to natural causes. I found it near the end of the pasture. There were no signs of predation because I didn't see the two small holes on the neck of the goat. I am positive that they would be there now after seeing what happens to the victims. The next goat was a younger buck that put up more of a fight. There was blood everywhere. The wound was jagged from the flailing goat. I had heard the commotion while on the porch, admiring the stars overhead. By the time I got to the goat, it was already dead. There were tracks nearby, and they were unlike anything I ever saw before. There were 3 toes, and individual scales on the feet made marks in the soil. I knew they were reptilian, based on my biology classes in college. However, their tracks were enormous. There were no native species that had tracks like that, and I'm not even sure non-native species left tracks like that either. After the second goat was killed, I installed electric fencing, which seemed to work. I didn't have any incidents until about 6 months later. By then, my guard was down, and the electric fencer crapped the bed one hot night in August. This left my herd open to attack from the obviously intelligent creature. I noticed it had tested the fence several times previously because of the alien tracks left behind near various sections of the fence line. It had been about 6 weeks since I noticed the last set of tracks, so I figured it had finally moved on to a neighboring farm. Again, I was admiring the stars on the porch when I heard the goats were obviously in distress. My heart sank. A cold sweat broke out because I feared the worst. I knew the fencer was on its last leg since I had bought it at an auction earlier in the year. But never in a million years did I think that damn thing would return. It goes to show how naive I was as a new farmer. I quickly grabbed the gun and ran toward the noise. It was a clear night, and the moon was out. I couldn't believe what I saw when I made it to the goats. 2 goats were sprawled on the ground, dead already, and a third was fighting off a creature. It was a creature I had never seen in my life before. The creature was reptilian, for sure. It had brownish-green scales that shone brightly in the moonlight. It had round, dark eyes and sharp teeth. Most notable were the 2 long canine teeth that punctured holes in the victims. I then realized that the creature drank the blood of the goats rather than eating the flesh. The canines tore the flesh into jagged streaks as the goats twisted against the creature's bite. Along the back of the creature were spines like a bluegill. The creature stood about 3 feet, but it was extremely muscular. It was able to subdue the third goat. As I watched in horror quickly, I stood frozen as the creature sank those canines into the goat's neck. It began to lap blood with its forked tongue like a dog drinking from a water bowl. Its eyes rolled back, showing the whites as it took pleasure in the feast. I couldn't move, but finally, a scream escaped my temporary paralysis. The scream drew the creature out of its trance and immediately squared up and began to hiss at me. It was displeased that I interrupted its feast. I mastered my fear long enough to raise the gun to shoot whatever the hell it was. But before pulling the trigger, it ran off into the long grass near the fence line. I stayed with the herd the rest of the night to protect them, but I sometimes feared for my own life. I held the gun tightly throughout the night and would nod off now and then before rousing myself to be vigilant. Once the sun rose, I immediately took care of the carcasses of the slain goats, and then repaired the fencer enough that it would run for the day. I would go into town to buy a new fencer to protect the herd. Before heading into town, I did a quick internet search to find out what I was dealing with. I quickly narrowed down what the creature was. According to the search results, I was dealing with a chupacabra. There were numerous sightings of the beast throughout the southwestern United States, into Mexico, and other Latin American countries. Others posted about their experiences, and I found out numerous people experienced the same thing I was going through. It became clear that once the creature was spotted, it disappeared. I hoped this was correct, but I wasn't taking my chances. It had been several months since the day I spotted the chupacabra. My herd is safe, but I remain vigilant. I hope I never have to see that evil creature again. I have pondered if I should move, but what if I can't escape it? I had the worst bus ride of my life recently, and not because of the reasons you'd think either. I moved to Cincinnati to go to the University of Cincinnati, but that didn't work out too well, which is why I really don't want to go home to my family's place just outside of Detroit. So that all led me to getting a ticket at the last minute for the bus that left at 5 p.m. I get car sick real easy, so when I got on the bus and everyone else was looking at their phones, I wasn't. Can't stare at that little screen when I'm in a moving vehicle, unless I want to feel like garbage. After we passed through Toledo, there wasn't much around, hardly even towns anymore. I was getting bored, just listening to music on my phone, and tired. So you can see why I first thought that I was just imagining things. I kept seeing this bat-like shape in front of the highway street lamps, swooping and diving like it was flying, but trick flying, you know? And I thought, okay, I'm tired and my brain is making this up. It can't really be there. But I kept seeing it, and I had this thought that it was following the bus. I thought that when we stopped, it might attack, which was weird. I mean, because I felt like that idea came from outside of me, almost as if this thing was telling me what it was going to do. I closed my eyes for a while, hoping that when I opened them, it'd be gone. It had to be, because this made no sense. But when I opened my eyes, it was swooping toward the bus. I couldn't deny that it was there. I looked around, but everyone else was focused on their phones, or a magazine, or whatever. Then we came to the next stop, which was Monroe. I couldn't wait to get there, because I was sure this thing would go away once we got to the city. Monroe's not a real big town though, and just one person got out at this deserted station. No one was around, and it was sort of late by then, at least 8 p.m. As we pulled away, I saw the thing standing by the streetlight, leaning against it, just cool as it could be. Maybe if you just glanced quickly at it, it looked like a person. It was person-shaped, but that's where the similarity ended. The wings were folded up behind it, but I could see the ends of them, and I could tell they were big as it was. And it was at least as tall as a person. It had no face at all and red eyes. Those eyes were looking right at me, like it was marking me, noticing me, maybe planning me as its next victim. I hunched down in my seat and pulled my hood over my head, but it still felt like it was looking at me. I was scared, but I didn't know what to do. All I could hope was that it would get tired of waiting for me by the time I reached Detroit. I knew it was crazy to think it was waiting for me. Why me, and not anyone else on the bus? And maybe it wasn't. I thought maybe I was just the only person looking. But I felt it, like I knew it was waiting for me, and I was terrified. I tried not to look out the window anymore, but it was hard because I kept hoping I'd look and it would be gone. I'd glance out, and there it would be, swooping near the lights. At the next stop, Flat Rock, I decided to switch to the other side of the bus. There were plenty of empty seats by that point, so I did. I doubted switching seats would be enough to fool it if it was looking for me. If it didn't follow me, though, then it probably wasn't looking for me. For a while, I didn't see it, and I started to relax. But just as we hit the suburbs of Detroit, I saw it again. Now, I wasn't getting off at the station downtown. There was a stop at the edge of town, and that's where my brother was supposed to pick me up. I wondered if the thing was going to attack me the second I stepped off the bus. As we got close to my stop, it disappeared again, but I didn't dare relax. Sure enough, the bus rolled up to the bus shelter. I saw the thing standing by the nearest streetlight, cool as could be. And I didn't see my brother's car. I texted him, and he said, "Running late. There in a few." My darn brother was always late. He was born late, our mama used to say. But this time, if he was late, that thing would get me. The bus pulled up and stopped. A few people were getting out. Like a coward, I waited. Let them off first. I had a feeling it didn't want them, and they did seem to be okay, walking off toward their cars or other buses. Finally, I had to get off. The parking lot was right behind where the thing was standing. I stuck my hands in my pockets and casually walked away from it, keeping it to the edge of the lot. It followed. I picked up the pace, not running because I had nowhere to go. When I saw my brother's car pull up, I broke out in the fastest run I'd ever done in my life. Just as I was within a few feet of his car, I felt wings whoosh by my head. Something grabbed my shoulder, but I shook it off and grabbed the door handle. Slammed the door shut, just as something hit the car window. Hard. "What's that?" my brother said. "Just go," I yelled. As we peeled out of the lot, I saw the thing fly up toward the light again. I didn't even try to explain it to my brother, and we never have talked about it.